Hello, everybody. Welcome into GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Thursday, February 27th. Hope everybody's having a great day so far. We have, of course, a lot to get into. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the big news surrounding the Kansas City Chiefs. Travis Kelce officially coming back, as well as the first team to use their franchise tag this season is the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll talk about that. We'll talk a little bit about Abdul Carter, what's going on with him. Abdul Carter, of course, dealing with that injury to his foot, potentially needing surgery, before going into a little bit about the rule changes that could happen as the competition committee meets soon in the NFL. A dream offseason for the Arizona Cardinals, and it's a Cardinal duo here as we take a look at the St. Louis Cardinals and what they might be able to do this year in the MLB. But before we get into any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Thursday, February 27th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our first topic of the day, that being the Kansas City Chiefs and their moves. Obviously, the big headlining one is Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce returning, the future Hall of Fame tight end, said or confirmed on the Pat McAfee show earlier today that he would be returning. The last game he played, obviously the Super Bowl, left a bad taste in his mouth. We talked a little bit about where it might be. Chiefs expected him to be back. He has one more year left on his contract. I do expect him to be done after this year. He may not still be the best tight end in the game anymore, but he still is a really good tight end. When people are talking about him falling off, they're talking about him falling off from a generational talent that he is and was in his prime to now at 36 years old just being a solid tight end. You know, he still hasn't fallen down to the level of some of the tight ends in this league that we are not talking about like this, right? He's a guy that at worst is a league average tight end. He, at worst, is a top 10 tight end in the NFL. He is someone that very comfortably I put in the top 5 because on any given Sunday, any given game, he can go out, pop off for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns because he's a very, very special athlete. A future first ballot Hall of Famer, arguably the greatest tight end to ever play the sport of football, right? These are all things that are true about Travis Kelce. The other thing, again, he's 36 years old. Travis Kelce is getting up in age, and it's fine. He's going to retire probably next year. But the people that are saying he can't play at an elite level anymore, he should retire, I think are a little bit ridiculous. There are players who, play until they are physically done. We've seen him mention that he's interested in being someone like that. Now, not every time do players go out like that. Not every time do we see a Celtics Shaq. We see his brother, Jason Kelce, retired at the top of his game. We see this happen all the time around sports, around football. But a lot more than that, we see players kind of just fade off as they get older, as they lose, as they move past their peak, past their prime. It's a normal thing. But Travis Kelce, despite being past his prime, is not a bad player by any stretch of the imagination. And I think the conversation that surrounded Travis Kelce about whether or not he would retire this offseason kind of started to talk about how he isn't the same player. And I felt, yes, that's right, but it goes a little bit further into, a little bit disrespectful for a guy who still, in my opinion, is a top 5 tight end in the NFL. Still, in my opinion, can go out there and not as a wide receiver 1, not as a number 1 option, but as a number 2 or a number 3 option on a Kansas City Chiefs team that's going to have a healthy Rashee Rice, that's going to have a healthy and available Xavier Worthy. You have him as a number 3 option on that team, it's a really good spot. The Chiefs will be back. Travis Kelce is coming back, and this is a huge, huge deal for them. He is a massive piece of that offense, even if he isn't showing up at the same level of production that he has been throughout the other 10 years of his career at. But that wasn't the only piece of news surrounding the Chiefs today, as they put a franchise tag on All-Pro guard Trey Smith. Trey Smith is a must re-sign for the Kansas City Chiefs. When we talked about the Chiefs earlier, this is a Kansas City Chiefs team that has some really big free agents. Most of their linebackers are free agents. They need to get some of them back. But the most important one was their guard, Trey Smith. Trey Smith, a former 6th-round pick of the Kansas City Chiefs, was someone that without him, that team would be completely different. The center and guard for these Chiefs teams have been amazing. The center point of this team, the ability for them to do tough running like Isaiah Pacheco likes to do, like Kareem Hunt likes to do. The weakness of this team was also on the offensive line, though. The weakness of this team was the tackles. And if you're going to go from 3 all-pro level guys to just 2 all-pro level guys and have 2 guys on the outside that just are not working for a Super Bowl contending team, this team is immediately going to suffer. We saw this team go from a dominant force offensively to one that was able to squeak by games this year. Still won 15 games overall, went 15-2 in the regular season, but without Trey Smith, I bet they probably lose about 6 or 7 games this season, especially since all of them were as close as they were. I think 4 more games could have gone the other way without a guy like Trey Smith in the lineup. So bringing him back in is huge for the Kansas City Chiefs. He's someone that I think, again, a must re-sign. But one of the interesting things about putting him on the franchise tag is the amount of money that he's getting paid. And that's one of the big things we look at, right? Usually in franchise tags, you're looking at getting the aggregate of the top 5 at your position or 120% of your last contract, right? That is the way that it usually works when we talk about putting on a franchise tag. The tag amount for an offensive guard this offseason is at $25 million for the offensive line. Right now, the highest paid offensive guard is at $21 million. Now, he would be getting just over $24 million this season if he played on the franchise tag, but that is not a normal thing. Usually, you don't get market resetting money at your position when you get the franchise tag. But with the salary cap going up, with these offensive linemen, the tackles especially getting a lot more, getting it paid a lot more than the guards, he now is the highest paid guard in the sport, at least for 1 year, at $24 million. So there's no reason to think that he won't sign and play on this franchise tag. Of course, I'm sure he wants to get a bigger deal. I'm sure he wants some job security in the future. But the fact of the matter that he is setting the market now at his position and he's on a tag is really crazy to see. It's not something that you see happen too often in the NFL. Overall, these are moves that I think the Chiefs needed to make. They were always expecting Travis Kelce to come back. And I don't understand why the people weren't, if I'm being completely honest with you. But Trey Smith is the more important piece of news here, in my opinion. He's someone that is integral for this Chiefs team to be successful, and the fact that they'll have him back, even on a massive contract, is going to do wonders for this Chiefs team in the future. But let me know what your thoughts are. What do you think of Travis Kelce coming back? How do you think he's going to do next season? What do you think about the Chiefs being the first team to use a franchise tag? How many more franchise tags do you think are going to be used? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention over to Abdul Carter. The draft combine, of course, is going on right now, but most of the top prospects are not participating. So we're going to talk a little bit about one of the top prospects, someone who could go number 1 overall in Abdul Carter. He had a bunch of news come out recently about a potential surgery that he might need. We're going to talk about that and much more coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Thursday, February 27th, if you are just tuning in. We just finished going over the Chiefs and their big moves today, being the first team to use the franchise tag on All-Pro guard Trey Smith, and the news that future Hall of Fame tight end Travis Kelce will be returning to play out his contract in 2025. In this segment, we turn our attention over to Abdul Carter, the potential number one overall draft pick in this year's 2025 NFL draft, had some news about a potential surgery he might need. We'll talk about that and much more. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Thursday, February 27th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit about Abdul Carter. Abdul Carter, the star edge rusher out of Penn State, isn't working out at the combine. Now, he had some injury issues heading into the final game they played this season, a little bit of a shoulder issue that had him basically using one hand. But now he might potentially need surgery. It's a minor issue with his foot. They could get surgery to replace the screw in his heel as that has flared back up. But reports indicate that he's not going to get surgery on this foot. He is someone that is a potential number one overall pick, someone that people are looking at as potentially the best overall prospect in this draft, ahead of guys like the top two quarterbacks, like Travis Hunter. He's someone that I think, despite what some people say, this is an injury that I think could really affect him. You have an edge rusher that's pretty good with speed. You need to be able to have that flexibility in the lower half of your body when you're talking about rushing the passer. His ability to set an edge, his ability to be strong, and that lower body strength is going to be really important, and it all kind of goes down to those points of contact in the feet. Now, it is just a minor issue for now. They have two options. They can go out and get that surgery, or they can say, we're going to show you at the pro day that it doesn't matter. But despite what some people are saying, despite what some things are coming out about, I think this is a massive deal. And I think this is actually going to affect his draft stock. Right now, we're looking at mock drafts where he could go 1-2 to the Browns, probably not any lower than number 5 overall in this draft. But you look at the rest of the guys on this draft board, right? You have a guy like Mason Graham, who sure doesn't play the edge, but is going to be someone that I think would be awesome to have on your team if you need a pass rusher or a guy to just run stuff. I love Mason Graham, right? These are guys that I think might go ahead of him. You have obviously the quarterbacks for those quarterback needy teams. So instead of going number 1 overall, potentially now he's fallen to number 4. And at that point, Travis Hunter might go. That pushes him to 5. At that point, you might have guys that like a Tetroa McMillan more instead of wanting an Abdul Carter, especially with the injury history. Now, this is another thing about him because he has not played this position for too long. He played at linebacker for most of his career. He just has 1 year as an edge rusher. So the fact that he's dealing with these injuries right before the draft, especially after some of the stuff we've talked about in the NBA with foot issues for some of those big men. I know it's not quite the same thing, but when you're looking at a guy that you're putting so much resource, such a high value resource into, as much as a number 1 or a top 5 overall pick in the draft, you want to make sure that he's going to be healthy. You want to make sure that he's going to be able to contribute to the team the way that you need him to contribute to the team. You want to make sure that Abdul Carter isn't going to be a waste of a pick. He's a guy that's dealt with a lot of injuries throughout his career, and the fact that it's flaring up again, I honestly think is very concerning. Would I still take him in the top 5? Probably. I think he's a very special talent, but I do think he kind of drops a half tier or so below, especially on the defensive side of the ball, below Mason Graham, in my opinion, because of this, especially if in the pro day it looks like it's bothering him. Now, of course, they're not going to do this pro day like this if they think it's going to bother him. It'd be better to get that surgery and not work out, because a team will still take him in the first round at a minimum. But if he doesn't look good on the pro day, it makes it super risky to draft him. Again, not a lot of experience, despite putting up some pretty gaudy numbers at Penn State last year. I just don't know. How much I trust putting a top 5 pick into a guy that's coming in injured, especially with how physical of a position he's going to have to play. Because of that, this does concern me a little bit. If I were him, I would go get that surgery. It doesn't hurt you in the long run. This is something that I think is going to help your career, right? Again, if you think that this injury isn't going to affect you, there's no such thing, right? If there's an injury that could potentially need surgery, right? It's always going to be a thing that could bother you. You're always going to be a little bit weaker on that side because something's wrong. If you need it to get fixed, just go get it fixed right now before it becomes a bigger issue. And that's the one thing that I'm concerned about. Abdul Carter is an elite athlete. Abdul Carter is going to go top 5 in this draft. But for whatever team drafts him in the top 5, whichever team potentially even drafts him number 1 overall, this is something to keep an eye on, because I think if teams are just going to be so nonchalant about this, foo-foo, it doesn't really make a difference, he's still going to be just fine, it concerns me a little bit. But we'll see. At the end of the day, he knows his body better than I do. His coaches and doctors know his body better than I do, and I think he'll probably be fine. But it is something to monitor as we take a look at mock drafts and him in the future. But I'd love to know your thoughts. What do you think he should do? What do you think is going to happen? How big of a deal do you think this is for his draft stock? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention about the rule changes. The competition committee meets very soon for the NFL, and a couple rules have been pushed out there for the NFL. We're going to talk about what they are, how big of a deal they are, and if they're going to get passed. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now. Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Thursday, February 27th. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over a little bit of Abdul Carter, the potential number 1 overall pick that now might require surgery on his foot and how that might affect his draft capital. In this segment, we turn our attention over to the Rules Committee in the NFL. The NFL has a couple policies. They vote on them every single year. There's a couple of them that stand out as rule changes that could be made this offseason. We'll talk about what they are, if they will be made, and whether or not they are good for the sport. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Thursday, February 27th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit about the rules changes, the competition committee. There's a couple of big ones here, and I want to start out with one that I've been trying to push for a while. No pun intended on it, but the tush push. The tush push is something that they've been trying to ban for at least the last 3 years, right? You have, in this case, the Green Bay Packers are the ones that are pushing the ban this time. The Packers proposed it. I mean, look, this is obviously a conversation to be had, but a lot of the ideas for why they want to ban it, and the reason that the Packers have said it, is because it's not a skillful play. It's an automatic 1 yard. That's what they're saying when you're in those short yardage situations, but it's not, though, right? And we've talked about this. We've had these conversations before. First of all, a lot of people want to bring in the injury side of things, right? And the one thing that you need to pay attention to that is they did a study with the tush push for last season, and they found that not a single player, 0 players all season long, were injured in the tush push play. So it's actually a very safe play, right? This is a play that, look, if the Packers say it doesn't take any skill, if the Packers say it's an automatic first down every time, they should be doing it. Every team in the NFL should be doing it. But the thing about this play is that it simply isn't. It simply isn't a skill-less play. It's a play that takes a special set of players to have, right? It takes, most importantly, a uniquely built quarterback for it to work as good as it does. You can't run this play with Matthew Stafford, right? You can't run the tush push, at least as effectively as the Eagles do it, with Brock Purdy, right? You can't run the tush push with Aiden O'Connell, with Tua Tagovailoa. You can't run the tush push with Patrick Mahomes. These guys aren't built to be able to run this play. At the end of the day, what makes this play as successful as it is for the Eagles is the unique set of players that they have on the offensive line, and more importantly, at quarterback. The subset of players that have the ability to do this play are Jalen Hurts, a guy that can squat nearly 700 pounds, right? That is a rare kind of athlete, a rare kind of lower body strength, and that's what it's going to take. Or a Josh Allen that is just a monster, and even they don't really do the tush push. They just have Josh Allen run at. I think if they did that play, that Josh Allen would be just as effective, if not more effective, than Jalen Hurts is, right? You need a big, strong quarterback to be able to run this play. And that is in a box that a lot of these guys, a lot of these quarterbacks around the league check off. Jordan Love isn't a quarterback that you can do this with, right? And that's really what it comes down to. What it comes down to is the fact of the matter that the teams that are proposing the ban of the tush push, the teams that are saying, I support the ban of the tush push, are just mad that they can't stop it. Sometimes there are things you can't do. Look, sometimes if you don't want to let them get that first down, you have to stop them from being 1 yard away. It's a risk. We've seen the tush push get stopped on a number of occasions, right? It's still about 90% successful, but so was Tom Brady on his normal QB sneaks, and you didn't see anybody trying to ban that. And that's because everybody could do a QB sneak. The difference is not everybody can do this tush push. Again, not everybody has that unique quarterback. Not everybody has a massive offensive line that averages over 360 pounds and over 6'7", right? That is a behemothly sized offensive line. Most teams don't have the ability to do that. And to the point that it's not a skillful play, again, it absolutely is. It's a tough to stop play, and I understand why teams are mad about it. I do. I really do understand why teams are mad about it, because if you're a team like the Washington Commanders that had to deal with it in the playoffs, we saw Luvu jump over the line a couple times, didn't work. The refs threatened to let them to automatically award them a touchdown because he kept jumping off sides. You have to get creative in ways to stop this, but we've seen it be stopped before. We have. It's a tough play to stop, but it's doable, and it's not something the Eagles are going to be able to do forever. As their players get older, as Jalen Hurts gets older, these are things that they're not going to be able to do 10 years from now. So to sit here and say this is a play that needs to be banned, on what merits? First of all, no injuries. 0 injuries last season based on the tush push. That's not a valid reason then, right? If it was, I'm all for banning it. I want this sport to be healthy. I want this sport to be safe for everyone to play, right? But if it isn't hurting anybody, there's no reason to take it away. They used to have a rule to stop pushing downfield. They've gotten rid of that, and that's part of the Packers' argument. But who really cares if they push downfield a little bit, right? Who cares if you get into a little bit of a rugby scrum? Who really cares about that, other than the defense that thinks it's unfair, which it isn't, because if you get a big guy, if you get a couple big guys that can get push against that offensive line, maybe then you can stop the tush push and push back on your own. That's a rule out there that's potentially going to be put in through the competition committee. I hope and I pray that it does not, because I think that would be kind of soft, honestly. And football, for as many things as it is, it's not a soft sport. So banning that play, there's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't make any sense. The other big rule change, of course, comes from a Bills-Chiefs game, and it even comes with a sort of tush push of their own, right? The Chiefs stopped the tush push of Josh Allen to turn it over on 4th down, right? It wasn't really a tush push. It was just a QB sneak, but still, now they're looking at adding a chip to the football to track first downs, track the position of the ball, and this is a long time coming. This is something that I think they're going to have to get good at determining, because depending on where the chip is, it could be a little bit off. So they're still going to have the chain gang on the sidelines to be kind of like a backup for this measuring system that they're going to be having at this point in the NFL. This is a rule that I can fully support. The people that are pointing out rules only get changed when the Bills lose against the Chiefs. Well, sometimes it takes a kick in the butt to make a good rule finally go through. And both of those, the overtime rule changing in the playoffs and this rule finally being implemented, These are rules that people have been asking for a while, and we saw one happen on the biggest stage, a big controversy, so now the NFL can react. The NFL not really a proactive league, definitely a lot more of a reactionary league than anything. That's just kind of how it goes. It's a coincidence, not really a full coincidence, because these two teams in the biggest spotlight, that's when the NFL is going to be like, oops, we need to change this when there's a big game between these two teams. Just happens that they've both been good for a long time, and you've had two pretty good games come down to some controversy at the end there. So the people saying that it's rigged for the Bills or for the Chiefs, whatever you want to say, it's just a coincidence there at that point. But overall, I love that first down rule. This is something that all sports need to start to integrate. As computers and technology gets better, you can't be scared. You can't run from them. You can't sit there and be like, we always did it like this. This is the issue with baseball, right? Baseball and their old heads are always so resistant to change. They've done a good job recently, honestly, as much as I don't like the commissioner of baseball because he doesn't do a lot of things right. But what he's been able to do to modernize this game, the pitch clock, was an excellent addition. Honestly, as much as it doesn't really make a big difference, and I kind of enjoyed seeing pitchers hit, adding the DH in the NL, probably a change that's good for the future of baseball, right? And then the other one, they're adding now a automatic strike zone. You can challenge it. They still have the umpires calling balls and strikes, but they're adding that automatic ball strike system that if you want to challenge it a couple times per game, you can go ahead and do that. So I like the changes that they're making, right? And you can't get left behind. You can't get left behind because as technology develops, it's going to make your life easier. And there's no reason to say tradition this, tradition that. Just move on, upgrade, and you can make the sport better for everybody. Both safety, fun, and just so it's more fair and less controversies come about it. Either way. It's always good when technology like this ball tracking technology, putting the chip in the ball, is not going to throw off the weight so much that a quarterback can't throw a spiral anymore. There's no reason not to put it in. And it's about time that the NFL made a change to keep up with the times and get this ball tracking technology to track first downs. But let me know what your thoughts are. What do you think of these two rules? Do you think they should both be passed? Do you think they're good for the game? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we continue our series of dream off seasons. Today, we take a stop down in the desert with the Arizona Cardinals. What would a dream off season look like for Kyler Murray, Jonathan Gannon, and the Arizona Cardinals? We'll be right back with that here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found. For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Thursday, February 27th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over some potential rule changes in the NFL. In this segment, we continue our ongoing series, taking a look at what a perfect offseason might look like for each and every NFL team. Today, we take a look at the Arizona Cardinals down in the desert. We talk about what they could improve on from 8-9, third in the NFC West. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Thursday, February 27th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit about what a perfect offseason might look like for the Arizona Cardinals. The Arizona Cardinals looked like they might find a way to sneak into the playoffs last season near the end of the year. Instead, they finished at 8-9, third in the NFC West, a tough division that finished with two teams at 10-7. They missed the playoffs, but this was a massive turnaround for an Arizona Cardinals team that was really bad last season. Their defense took a massive step up. They were just a league average defense this year. Last year, their defense was not it. They had a little bit of a pass rush as well, and that was something that they were really missing out on. Some of their young guys really stepped up and had really good seasons for them. They also have a lot of money this offseason. They have $75 million to play with in the cap space. That is good for fifth in the NFL. So a team that is on the brink of making the playoffs has the fifth most cap space in the NFL to go out and fix a lot of their issues. And their biggest issues was, of course, pass rush and the offensive line. You have some weapons. It'd be nice to get another weapon and continue to develop the connection between Maserati Marv and Kyler Murray. That'd be really cool to see if they were able to get a little bit more on the same page. But outside of that, this is a team that has 20 pending free agents, five more that are restricted free agents. There's a couple of big pieces, including almost half of that offensive line. Guard Will Hernandez, right tackle Kelvin Beachum, and their center Evan Brown, all of which are free agents this year. They also have some special teams, their kicker and their punter, both free agents. Matt Prater, free agent, although he was still dealing with some injuries last season. They also have a couple of defenders, some key defenders from last season. In linebacker, Kaiser White, their starting linebacker, a free agent, and two edge rushers. One they traded for from the Broncos, didn't really get a lot of playing time in Baring Browning, but I think he's a guy that'd be really good for them to keep, as well as edge L.J. Collier. These are two guys that if you keep at least one of them, whichever one you like more, I think could really be good as you continue to develop that pass rush under Jonathan Gannon. I think the most important guy to re-sign out of this list is Kaiser White. White played over 90% of the snaps at linebacker for the Arizona Cardinals last season in a much improved defense. Continuing to have continuity across your team is extremely important when you're talking about building and getting past a rebuild. This is a team that has the offense basically figured out, especially if they can get an offensive line. But the offensive line that was as physical as they were last season is really good because you have a physical runner in James Conner, you have a running quarterback in Kyler Murray, and as long as these guys are comfortable with a guy that can extend the play, bringing back Evan Brown, bringing back Kelvin Beachum, you could probably try and find some upgrades. But these are guys, if you can't find anybody out there, these are guys that I think would be really important to bring back. But the most important one of the list is Kaiser White. Of the restricted free agents, bring back Greg Dortch, I think would be nice. He's someone that I expected to have a breakout season last year. Didn't really do too much, but getting a guy that is explosive like Dortch is, his ability to play in the run and the pass game is really impressive. And for a guy that can play in the slot, he's someone that, as we talk about a lot of receivers like this, if he were 6'7", he would be the best receiver in the NFL, right? He's a little bit shorter. He's got his weaknesses, but he's still a guy that I think is worth hanging on to. They let Rondale Moore walk last offseason, and he's someone that I thought would step up into that role. He didn't do it, but I think he still has the ability to do that. Greg Dortch, someone that I think would be interesting to re-sign for the Arizona Cardinals. Again, they have $75 million to play with, so they can go out and get the best of the best if those guys are really interested in coming to the desert. The issue is, they just finished last place in that NFLPA players poll report card, right? That is something that I think is really going to hurt them. They're going to have to pay a premium to get these guys, right? That's something that Jacksonville had to do. They've started to increase their standing in the league as stuff has changed, but Arizona continually, with the owners seemingly unfazed, unwilling to change. I think maybe as he might have to pay more money for free agents, this is something that might change for them. But for now, it's going to be a little bit expensive. Go out and get the best offensive line that you possibly can. At pick number 16, the top offensive linemen are not going to be available. There are going to be some edge rushers available, though. Maybe if you can get lucky, despite what happened at the draft combine today, maybe a guy like Shamar Stewart is there. He's someone that's going to be climbing up boards, but before the draft combine, he was sitting anywhere in the teens, the early teens of picks, and maybe Shamar Stewart finds a way to fall to the Cardinals at 16. That's someone that would be awesome for them to get. James Pierce Jr. is a guy that's starting to fall down boards. Maybe he's someone that they can get at 16. Walter Nolan is who I had mocked when I did my mock draft 2.0 a couple weeks ago. We'll do another mock draft once the combine is up. But Walter Nolan, another pass rusher, would be interesting. And the last one, Mike Green out of Marshall. Adam Marshall might drop his stock a little bit, but 17 sacks last season. This is a guy that would be really good. Really smart for the Cardinals to go out and get. In free agency, with $75 million, like I said, go all in on offensive line. Go and get the best offensive lineman out there. Go and get Jedrick Wills if you can pay enough for him to come over from Cleveland. Go and get all of these massive names that are available at offensive line. Now that Trey Smith is off the market, that's someone that I would have said drop a whole bag for him. Instead, he's staying with the Chiefs, so that kind of takes a little bit of the air out of their sails. But go get an edge rusher too. Maybe you can try and bring in the end of Khalil Mack's career to Arizona, kind of like you did with J.J. Watt. That would be really cool to see. If you're able to bring him in, if he's still effective like he was last season, that would do a lot. It would honestly do wonders for this team that just really needs to get more guys defensively. I like the secondary. I really do like the way they're built back there. It's not perfect, but with Budda Baker and a couple of rookies that stepped up last season, this is a secondary that doesn't really scream major weakness to me. Maybe you can get a backup wide receiver, or wide receiver 2, I should say, to put opposite of Marvin Harrison Jr. That would be good for them to get as well. It's all just how much money are you going to have to spend? What's the premium going to be to bring players down to Arizona? But expect them to be big spenders in free agency with how much money they have. I think this is a team that thinks they're pretty close. As long as they believe in Kyler Murray, they should continue to go all in while he's here and while he's healthy. When it comes to the big story for them, again, Kyler Murray kind of is the big question for them. Is he the guy that's going to be able to lead them to the promised land? He's led them to successful seasons in the past, right? Is Kyler Murray going to be the answer for them in the future? He's locked up for a while, so it's not a question they need to answer now, but it is something that, as we've seen a little bit of collapses down the stretch of the season with different coaches now, is Kyler Murray the problem instead of it being Cliff Kingsbury? We will have to see. I don't think he is, but it is something to think about. The perfect offseason for the Cardinals. Spend all of your money. Spend it all. The cap space is going to continue to go up. It went up over $20 million to $279 million this year. It was at $255 last year. Basically, $25 million more. You have so much money to spend. Go out, spend it. Make sure you get a good defense to please your defensive-minded coach, and get another wide receiver for Kyler Murray. That's what I think is needed here. But let me know what your thoughts are. What do you think the perfect offseason would look like for the Arizona Cardinals? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, another Cardinal, this time in a different space, a different sport. We're going to look at what the MLB season might hold for the St. Louis Cardinals. Coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Thursday, February 27th. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over what a perfect offseason might look like for the Arizona Cardinals. In this segment, we switch gears over to baseball, talk a little bit about the other Cardinal, the St. Louis Cardinal. What is their season going to hold? This is one of the teams that had the quietest offseason in all of the MLB. We'll talk about what that means for them and if that means they can make it back to the promised land, to the playoffs with the core that they currently have. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Thursday, February 27th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit of a season preview for the St. Louis Cardinals. This is a Cardinals team that had a really bad season 2 years ago, fell off a cliff. They go 83-79 last year, good enough for second in the NL Central, tied for second place there, right behind the Brewers. This is a team that is really disappointing this offseason. As I alluded to in the intro of this segment, they didn't sign anybody. They didn't do anything. They did not sign a single person to a minor league deal. To a major league deal. They only signed 4 players to minor league deal, and they made one trade for cash considerations with the Rockies. That's the only thing they made to mess with their 40-man roster. And this isn't the guy they traded for isn't even going to be a major player, right? They go out and they get Nick Anderson, relief pitcher, outfielder Ryan Vilade, utility man Jose Barrero, and relief pitcher Michael Gomez. Those guys, they all signed to minor league deals, none of which are projected by Fangraphs to make the opening day roster, or even be on the 40-man. But it's not just that. They also lost some key pieces. They lost an MVP from a couple years ago in Paul Goldschmidt, who was falling off a cliff a little bit, but still a very important piece of the puzzle for what made them successful when they were winning baseball games. Backup first baseman Matt Carpenter, a good bench bat to have. Relief pitcher Andrew Kittredge, a pretty solid piece in their bullpen. 2 starters in Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson, and another relief pitcher in Kenyon Middleton. That is a lot to lose for a team that didn't do anything. And on the surface, those guys, it's not necessarily a big loss, right? On the surface, losing Goldschmidt and Kittredge and Lynn and Gibson and Carpenter, it's a bunch of old guys that are past their prime. But when you take a step back and you look at everything else that's surrounding them this season, when you take a look at everything else that the Cardinals did, everything that the Cardinals were this season, it's really disappointing. This is a Cardinals team that was desperately trying to get back to their glory days, right? This is a Cardinals team that was desperately trying to be that successful Cardinals team that it was when you had those guys like Yadier Molina, you had those guys like Albert Pujols, like everybody else that was a part of that Cardinals pseudo dynasty in the early 2010s, right? This was a really good Cardinals team, and they've been good for a while. They always seem to have that Cardinals devil magic that takes them to the playoffs at the last second, but all of it has seemingly gone away. And this is an organization that is so content to just kind of sit on their hands and do nothing. It's just a team that's rotting away from the inside. It's like a fruit that you leave too long out on the countertop. It's starting to rot away into just nothing. This is a team that when you look at their roster, they don't really have an answer for who's going to be that big guy that steps up. Some trade rumors around third baseman Nolan Arenado might show that they're trying to blow it up, but they haven't really bitten on anything. Nolan Arenado is the last big piece. He's someone that if they really wanted to start over, you get rid of him. You have Mason Wynn at shortstop. You have a DH in Alec Burleson, first baseman now converted from catcher. Wilson Contreras Left field, Brandon Donovan. Third baseman, Nolan Arenado. Lars Nootbaar in center. Jordan Walker is someone that I really like in right, but the Cardinals keep sending him up and down and up and down, and they don't let him get comfortable at the MLB level. They're taking away his confidence. It's killing him. This is a Cardinals team that is completely mismanaging their talent, like a Jordan Walker, that was a top prospect in baseball when he was a prospect until he graduated earlier last season. You have Nolan Gorman and Thomas Sagase at second base, and Ivan Herrera to put at catcher. You also have you've got Pages as well as a backup center, but there's nothing that really screams, I love the way this lineup is going when you're looking at the way this lineup is built. There's no great guy in this lineup that you can count on for a huge positive WAR season, right? The big bat, you have Nolan Arenado falling down to 5. Wilson Contreras, his injuries, he's not a guy that I feel like I can count him. And having at first base, this is a team that was built around defense in their glory days. This is a team that was built around having a great infield, especially. And now that's disintegrated into nothing. This is a Cardinals team that I think is extremely disappointing and really needs to hit that reset button, which sucks because a guy like Jordan Walker that's really young, and this is a team that has some young talent, Lars Nootbaar, Jordan Walker. Again, these guys have talent, but on a team like the Cardinals, they're not going to be able to do anything, especially with an ownership group that does nothing in the offseason. Quite literally nothing in the offseason they did. So now we look at the rotation. They lost a couple starters. Lance Lynn, a little bit older. Kyle Gibson, they lose as a starter as well. And now you're left with Sonny Gray. They traded for Eric Fetty, a guy that was a lot better after a year in the Korean League, but still not a guy that you want to be at the top of your rotation. Miles Mikolas, a little bit older, has a little bit left. Andre Palante and Steven Matz. This is not a pitching rotation that I look at and I'm like, wow, this is particularly scary. And when you have the rest of your division, I know we talked about the Brewers also not really getting better this offseason, but the other teams in your division are trying to get better. The Pirates have a flamethrower, a superstar at pitcher, and they're hopefully trying to get better around him, right? This is a team that didn't really do too much, and we'll get to that when we get to the Pirates later on, but they didn't do too much. You have the Reds, who have a lot of super young talent. If they can stay healthy, they should run away with this division. And you have the Cubs, who definitely tried to get better. They made some big trades this offseason. And then you have the Cardinals, who just kind of sat there and did nothing. When you look at the bullpen, after losing a guy like Kittredge, you've got Ryan Helsley right there, Matthew Liberatore, Ryan Fernandez, Jojo Romero. This is not a bullpen that, again, screams incredible baseball to me. This is a team that I think is just going to continue to slowly rot away until they're a basement feeder, until they blow it up. And it's a shame because there's a lot of players that I'd like to see at the end of their career find some success. There's a lot of players, and this is a very proud organization. I'd like to see these guys play out on a good team, or at least start their career on a good team, some of these guys. But at the end of the day, this is a team that I think is really going to fall off this season. Their over-under from Vegas is set at 75.5. That is a massive loss from last season. They won 83 games last year. Vegas says they're going to lose 7 or 8 more games than they did last year. I think they're going to lose even more. I think they finish at around 70-92. I just don't like where this team is heading. I don't like that they sat on their hands and did nothing, and this is a team that has no direction. They're just clinging on to the old days as long as they possibly can without trying to get better. Like we said about the NFL early on in the show, embrace the new. Embrace the new. Otherwise, you're going to get left behind, and that's what's happening with the Cardinals right now. But let me know what your thoughts are. What do you think the Cardinals are going to be this season? You think they can shock me, shock the world? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We will be back tomorrow going over everything from the first day of the NFL Combine. We saw Shamar Stewart absolutely kill it. We'll talk about him, everyone that didn't participate, everyone that did, and what the big standouts were, as well as continuing our MLB and NFL preview series. Thank you. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.